Okay, tonight we have got two great guests. We're going to get on to that right now. Our first guest tonight is Lasha Seniuk. I believe I pronounced that right. Lasha is a journalist, an astrologer, and a mystic. Her unique poetry, her unique poetic daily and weekly horoscope columns have been internationally syndicated across Canada, the United States, and Britain. In 1983, after the extensive study of cosmology, astrology, poetry, and literature, Lasha moved to Vancouver, British Columbia, where she soon graduated with her master's degree in fine arts. On the west coast of Canada, she was introduced to several tantric Tibetan teachers who would soon help her awaken her complex mystical background, trigger her many past life memories, and reveal her life to be something quite different than she ever expected. She has studied many ancient techniques, and in concert with several celestial beings has directed to use those techniques to influence, direct, and amplify powerful magnetic earth grid energies. In this lifetime, as well as others, Lasha has performed precisely these types of spiritual tasks at times of great change. Her website, and we're going to talk about all kinds of different things, her website is www.mysticstars.net. She speaks openly on the subject of mysticism and offers a podcast on all things esoteric on her website as well. Very interesting lady. Without any further delay, let's go ahead and get her on the line if we don't drop her. Lasha, are you there?
Hi, Pat. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you so much. Welcome to K-Talk and AM 630.
Well, thank you, sir. It's lovely to speak with you.
So how are you doing tonight? You're in Vancouver?
I am, and just so you be forewarned, I'm living right next to a place where they're having a big air show.
Okay.
So there's been these fighter jets going overhead all day. So you might hear a fighter jet every once in a while.
Okay, well, that's cool. Fighter jets are cool.
Yeah.
Well, how is your weather there? Are you guys? It's a lot cooler climate there, isn't it?
Well, no. You see, I'm more in southern Canada, which is right next to the border of the U.S., right on the border of the U.S. and Washington.
Okay.
Right now, it's very hot.
Gotcha.
But I did grow up in northern Canada, more northern Canada, in Edmonton, where it's a lot cooler. But right now, today, it's very hot.
Wow.
And, you know, Pat, who gets 3 inches of hail? That's just biblical.
Oh, I know. I mean,
my gosh.
We had a storm come through here Wednesday. It was interesting. We were out this is our first year we did a big garden, and I've had different, I don't want to call them preppers, but homestead type people on the show, fringy type stuff.
Sure.
Not that growing gardens is anything new, but I think people are being a little bit more self-aware of things and trying to be a little more self-sufficient. And we planted a huge garden, and it's been a terribly hot and dry summer here in Salt Lake City. And we were asking for rain, and we got the rain, and then the hail came. And I think what actually decimated the garden was 2-3 inches of hail that just sat there for hours. I think it just froze everything.
Well, I mean, really, that's just ice falling from the sky.
Right.
Very strange.
Yeah, very strange, and that's something we usually don't see here, more of a Midwest type thing. But anyway, our tomatoes survived it all.
Tomatoes.
Yeah, they made it through, but everything else just got wiped out. But that's okay. That's it's life and it goes on. So but just crazy. Anyway, I read your bio here. But why don't you give our listeners a little bit of background and let's go a little bit deeper. And we're going to cover all kinds of different subjects. But obviously, how did you get to where you are today?
Oh, now thereby hangs a tale. I grew up in more northern Canada in Edmonton, Alberta, and grew up there for a fair amount of time and was constantly having other entities or feelings of information coming into me, which was just a bit odd. I didn't realize that most people kind of didn't go through that until I was a little bit older. I started to feel really compelled to move and felt very drawn to the west coast of Canada in the Vancouver area. And this started, I guess it was about, back when the earth was green, back in about 1983, 82. And was right around the same time too that I noticed the sun changed. You know, I walked out of my house one day going to school. I was taking summer school at the time. Walked out of my house and everything was different. The sky was sort of a different color. It wasn't that deep blue. It had a sort of a very white blue color. It was a lighter color. The shadows seemed different. Colors seemed different. And it was the sun had sort of changed its, I don't know, somehow it's changed its tempo. It's changed its luster.
Its look.
The light started changing at that point. I don't know if you remember when you were, years ago that the sky was a much deeper color of blue.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Anyway, it was right around that time that these presences started being really strong for me, and I felt really more and more compelled to basically move to the west coast of Canada, in Vancouver. Anyway, to make a long story short, I mean, I was doing my undergraduate degree at that point, and I mean, I was sort of geared up to go do either medical school or law school, something like this. I come from a long line of judges and lawyers and doctors and this kind of stuff. Anyway, I gave all that up and I moved to the West Coast just by these feelings, and I entered into a program to do my master's degree in fine arts in creative writing and journalism, which I completed in '88. Anyway, as soon as I came to the West Coast, I very quickly was contacted by people involved very strongly in mysticism and people involved very strongly in Tantric Tibetan Buddhism, and became very quickly aware that some of these presences were actually some of my teachers that were alive at this time and were actually Tantric Tibetan teachers. And they were, I mean, just to make a long story short, I've studied with them extensively for quite some time. And, I also studied astrology since I was very young, and all sorts of mysticism, psychic events, and, UFO events have happened to me, and basically began to unravel that, and remember past life experiences and unravel that I've had many lifetimes experiencing, affecting, I know this is going to sound strange, but affecting the magnetic electrical grid work on the planet, on the Earth.
Wow.
And what is done is you do that from various specific places on the Earth, and one of which is very close to Vancouver. And so this is the reason I was very much drawn here. I've since started becoming very aware of it, and in last years, and working to change that frequency, which has been done in the last, there's that magic date, 2012.
Right.
So that's kind of how I got here. There's, probably a great deal more going on, but I don't know. That's sort of the streamline of it.
Well, it's interesting that people that to you, for you kind of obviously you had some experiences, which you sent me some talking points, and I'd like to get into a little bit tonight. Mm-hmm. But it seems like there's a lot of people that some people seem to experience things or have a huge major change or a major shift in their life, and they realize it, and then there's a lot of others that don't. And I don't know if it's because some people are open to it or open to the possibilities, or there's just people that are closed-minded. I find that the more open-minded, and of course that's what we preach here all the time, the more open-minded you are, the more things seem to unravel, and yet if you're closed-minded, they really don't.
But, Pat, have you noticed in the last years that it's changed? People seem to be awakening very quickly and very fully, and I'm here to say that there is a cycle that goes on, and very much the electromagnetic grid of the Earth influences exactly how much awareness the population or the consciousness is available on this Earth. And when that changes at certain cycle times, people can awaken much more easily, and they just accept these kinds of things more fully. So I think that's really what's been going on in the last few years. I think you would also expect to see that when people are awakening more fully and more able to be more conscious, you're also going to get a lot more negative behavior from people that can't awaken, people that are struggling with it. So I think we're definitely going through a major shift of consciousness on the Earth, And I think it's going to take us probably a good 100 years to really get it fully gone through. But it's a major change coming.
Well, and I agree. And I think people, and I've said this so many times, probably sound like a broken record, but I think people are also starting to kind of question, not necessarily their faith, but I think people are starting to kind of question maybe their beliefs a little bit. For so many years, I think that a lot of us didn't do this. I think for years a lot of us just kind of, we went along with the flow, and I think that I think people are starting to, they're starting to see things like we talk about ufology, and we'll get into that a little bit tonight. And that's, I mean, they're starting to question things that they're seeing, and people seeing things out of the corner of their eye, or they're having, if we want to call them a paranormal experience. Years ago, you didn't talk about stuff like that. People think you're crazy, but now people are coming forward, and even in small inner groups talking about it, saying, hey, yeah, this happened to me, or I felt this, or I had this happen. And there, people, I think, are starting to become genuinely more aware.
Oh, I completely agree. And you know what? It's really good that people are questioning their beliefs and their faith, because you know what, Pat? If you can't test it in your teeth like gold, what good is it?
Right.
You have to be able to have an experiential experience with your own faith, with your own belief, with your own existence, or else what's the point?
Right.
There's nothing else. And, I also have a feeling that the reason people are coming forth and reporting more seeing shadow entities or different things is because, as I said, the grid is changing, and we're capable of being able to see a lot more of these things. And I think much more of that is going to continue on. It's going to get more and more. You'll probably start to see some very specific signs. And I don't want to sound biblical here, but you're going to start to see some very specific things like that are, as the grid changes even more so, and it'll be like sustained lightning balls that'll kind of slowly come down from the sky every once in a while. Those big booms that people are hearing all the time, this is part of it. And there's just a great changing going on. And it's very deep. One thing that strikes me too is that, in the Bible they say the dead will raise.
Yes.
I have a feeling it just really means that people are going to be able to start seeing other dimensions and seeing the dead. I don't think they're going to raise out of the ground. I think it's more of a dimensional thing coming through. So I think that's the stage we're at now in humanity, and I think it's a very, very exciting time.
Well, there's some world events that are going on. Obviously, this something that I think people need to be a little bit concerned about.
Sure.
When we talk about the life being fragile, I mean, look at this Ebola incident that's happening over in Africa, and people are perishing. I think there's some real threats out there. I think there's some things that are starting to happen, and I'm not saying that it's maybe because the way we treated the planet. I don't want to put that in there, but I think some of the carelessness is starting to rear its head. Obviously right now the United States and Russia have talks that are literally breaking down. I think we're going into a very volatile time. I think our economy, I don't know up in Canada, but I know here in the United States, it's recovered somewhat, but it's nowhere near where it used to be. There's still, tens of millions of people out of work. There's tens of millions of people losing their homes and don't know how they're going to pay their next bill next week. I think there's a lot. I think we're kind of coming to a cusp here of a lot of things that are starting to all converge, and it's kind of scary. And I think people are kind of scared. And I think it's going to take a leap of faith on everybody's part to make some changes. And maybe we will see some sort of sign that says, hey, it's time to put some of these small things aside. Not that people dying of Ebola is small by any means, but these wars and I think things are just starting to escalate pretty quickly.
But I don't think it's going to be a huge, big sign. I think it's going to come from all sorts of individuals inside themselves. as consciousness changes, I think that's really what's going to change it. And these negativities, I think, will actually just kind of fade away. You know, I like to think of the Earth and all the people on it as just one person. I mean, it sounds funny, but if you think of it that way, the negativity and the evil that's in that one person is really just their shadow side, their hidden side.
Right.
You know, and we have to get in touch with that so that we can heal it and we can let it go. I think that's part of what is going on in this cycle, is that, you know, the negative things are going to look and sound so big and scary, but at a certain point I think they're just going to kind of shrivel because we're moving beyond them.
Right.
I mean, I don't mean to sound like some sort of, you know, Pollyanna or something like that, but it just is really clear to me that people are really waking up, and they're doing it having gone through tremendous struggles in their life, and they awaken to something quite different. I think life is quite different than we think it is, or than we've been told it is, and I think a lot of people are coming to understand that. Now,
you mentioned the word dimensions, and I'd like to talk a little bit on that. You know, of course, you know, when we're here as humans on this planet, my belief is that we're all, you know, we all have that internal or eternal spark, that energy. I totally believe that everything that I've experienced in my life is not something that I've learned while being, you know, here on this planet for 50 plus years. I believe that everything that I know, everything that I sense, everything I experience, while I've learned a lot here, I believe that had to have started somewhere else. I don't believe 50 years could put me where I am today.
Are you speaking of past lives? Or?
Well, I'm just saying, I mean, as far as if you want to call it a spirit, a soul, an essence, I feel, yeah, past life, exactly. Or, you know, I mean, I've had several guests on that they feel that the life that they're in today here as a human on this planet, they picked it at one time. They chose this for some reason, and they'll choose many, many, many times again, and maybe not here on Earth, maybe somewhere else. But I mean, I get that sense that, and it's taken many years for me, and I didn't believe it for a long time, but that everything that I am and the people that are close around me is, it's not, you know, whether if you're 40 years old, it's not 40 years of experience that gave you the knowledge and the senses and all that. It started long time before that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a much more complicated and involved process than we think of. If we just sort of mire ourselves in the physical, we're missing so much. The physical is just a very slender, very tiny sliver of what reality is. You know, there's so much more. You know, you're right. You do manifest on lots of different worlds, even simultaneously. You do have an extremely long history. You know, it's very complicated. It's very complex, and past lives are very much a part of it. You know, one thing that people don't seem to realize too is that when you're going to sleep at night,
right,
and you're just falling asleep, and you see suddenly a flash of someone's face, or you see a circumstance or someone that you don't recognize. Well, you know what? That's you from a past life. Our past life memories are right there. They're right there in us. You know, people don't realize that they have so much to draw on just from their own experience.
How do we I mean, are you able to tap into those things? How do we tap into that?
It's a process. You know, anybody can do it. It's a matter of just taking the time to do it and putting yourself on a spiritual path. And that can mean different things for different people. You know, it doesn't have to be some sort of, you know, rules and regulations. This is how you do it. But meditation is definitely the key. You have to be willing to practice meditation and calm the mind to the point where it starts to open and you start to realize things. And when that happens, you set out on a journey that is really quite remarkable. You know, I hear an awful lot of these people, the New Age people, they talk about stuff as if they're being spiritual and this kind of. And no, I'm you know, it's a much more involved process than simply kind of, you know, being plugged into what's happening around, you know, politically or this or that. There's much more to it than that. It's a very physical process. It's a very struggling kind of process. You have to go through quite a lot of negativity. You have to really test yourself. It's not easy, but it's why we're here.
Right. Do you feel that we're here to learn these things, experience these things, and then take them somewhere else?
In a way, I suppose we're here and in order to eventually return back to the source. I mean, if we look at the really, really huge picture of it, that's eventually what will happen. I mean, but we're here to learn. We're here to better ourselves, and physicality is a part of that cycle. We exist on lots of different levels, and at certain points we become physical because we need to. We need physicality. It's like something that drives us forward. We need to have these experiences and these lessons in a very physical, very dense way. But it's a very small segment of what you're actually learning.
Right. Now, when you talk about dimensions, looking at some of your notes, what was your experience when you first started seeing other dimensions, and did it confuse you? Did it maybe scare you a little bit, or were you kind of prepared, or I mean, if you could just describe it to the listeners, what is it like to see another dimension?
Well, it's quite bizarre. First of all, you start with nature. That's where you have to start. And what you do is you train yourself, your inner vision. And a lot of mystics have spoken about this, or written about it, not so much publicly, because usually we like to keep these things very secret. But you start by understanding the energies behind nature, and you start to see them physically. You start to see things that are green actually have a red hue to them around them, and you start to develop, like how you would look at someone's aura, but it's more about every object. And as you become more steady with this, it becomes deeper, and you be able to rely on it. It's like an inner vision that you're developing. And if you're doing a meditation practice and a spiritual practice at the same time, it can really crack through and open for you. And you start to see things like, people talk about, seeing shadow beings or this or that, and you just start to see them more regularly. What happened for me at this point is I came across, or was instructed to do, a very involved series of meditations that were resonant meditations that involved sound, certain positionings of the jaw, this kind of stuff. And I did that for about a 2-week period, or 2.5-week period, and for certain amounts of times every day. And at a certain point, blammo, you just see everything. You just see everything. And I tell you, it's one heck of a lot more complicated going on than you even have any idea about, And what I did, I just sat on a park bench for about 3 days and just watched everything. I mean, it was really quite something. Things that settle on to you when you fall asleep at night, things that are in the room right now with you that you don't see, energies that are moving around, beings from other realms that come up from the ground, huge banners of energy that go through the sky. I mean, I could go on and on. Some of it can be very, very frightening, and it's not for the faint of heart. I think you have to be ready in order to see it, or else it could be something that could make you have quite a lot of problems.
Right.
It's complicated. It's intense. Some things are absolutely beautiful, absolutely just stunning. There are, a lot of plants. There are a lot of colors that actually have music behind them and tones behind them. It's difficult to describe, but it's there constantly. And once you start to see it, and don't get me wrong, you don't see it all the time unless you want. You have to be able to shut it off. It's an inner vision. But it's very strong and it's very profound.
So, did these things for you, Lasha? Was it something that appeared to you? I mean, or was it through your training and through your study that you were able to get yourself to the point where you could see these things?
A little of both. I've had many lifetimes where I've worked as a mystic, and this is an extension of that. Much depends on your past lives, how you will be able to experience awareness in this lifetime. That said, anybody can really, have rapid human development and go through a lot of it in one lifetime. So I'm not saying that, it's only limited to people that have had many past lifetimes. But it was also a sense of meditating over a period of years and then deepening that. I'm working also very strongly with celestial beings, and some of my teachers that aren't in the physical body are constantly with me and helping me. So, and we all have that. People misunderstand. They think that they're alone. We all have teachers around us all the time that are working really, really hard to help us awaken. And they're not like angels, like something out of a Bible. This is how nature works. This is how life works. At some point you'll be doing this for somebody.
Yeah, I would like to. I think a lot of people would like to get a little bit more in tune. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I have never experienced anything like that. I mean, I've seen things out of the corner of my eye. I sometimes, I don't know, maybe when you sometimes get that sense that you're in an empty room, but you feel like there's somebody else in there, obviously, or maybe there is somebody else in there.
Probably.
It's and they say the human eye can only see 2% of the light spectrum. It would be interesting to see the other 98%.
Well, one thing that people can do is just be open to what they're feeling. And I don't mean that from an emotional point of view, like anger or this, but in their heart. A lot of people think the mind is in the brain. It's not. It's in the chest. I remember once talking to a Tibetan Lama and saying, how do I make my mind better? And he looked at me and smiled, and he pointed to his forehead and he said, your mind? And then he pointed to his heart and he said, or your mind. It's what's deep inside you. That's where you sense it from. It's not something that is. So when you're in a room and you feel something, it's probably something is there. All you need to do is open up a little bit and kind of be receptive. There's nothing out there that can hurt you unless you let it.
Right.
You are the captain of your soul. You can be open to these kinds of things and learn from them, but not be overwhelmed by them. That's what you need to understand, is that if you start to think of it as a frightening experience, it'll shut down.
Well, and I think fright is I think that's kind of I think it's kind of a human emotion. I think a lot of times when people experience fright, I think that's, and I don't know if you agree or not on this, but I think a lot of times that's a little bit of Hollywood. That's us watching movies and reading books and what have you. Things to entertain, I think, sometimes can get a little bit confused. The confusion can get thrown in. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fringe Radio Show. Lasha, thank you so much for sharing your Saturday night with us and talking about all these things.
Oh, not a problem. What was that music you just played? It sounded like it was from My Favorite Martian.
Lost in Space.
Oh, I love it.
And for those of you who are Lost in Space fans like I am, you can a lot of stations across the country, probably up in Canada too, on MeTV every Saturday night at 11 p.m. They have Lost in Space on. So when I get out of here at 10 o'clock and get home, usually grab a little bite to eat and sit down and watch it. Fun show. We've had Angela Cartwright on, and I'm actually trying to get her and Billy Mooney to both come on the program again. We had her on. It's been a couple of years ago now, but try to get a couple of the cast members on. We had Angela on, and of course she's her big claim to fame is she was in the original Sound of Music and has been in the Danny Thomas show and stuff. But it was a fun interview. I did the interview with her. I had to jump through a lot of hoops to get her to come on, and she gave me 1 hour and was talking about the Sound of Music and everything. And then we had about 15 minutes left, and she said, "All right, now I know what you really want to talk about." And she said, "Go ahead." And we spent the last 15 minutes talking about it in depth. Really nice lady. And like I said, we're trying to get her and Billy both on at the same time.
Oh, that was a great show. That would be a great interview.
Oh, talk about it's so interesting too. It is so interesting that while it's people with the graphics and everything that we, all the CGI and all the stuff that's out there today, it's kind of crazy. But amazing what they could do with some cardboard sets and a studio.
They really captured the imagination, didn't they?
Exactly. They sure did. So it was definitely fun show, and still to me still fun. Sad to see stuff like that kind of go away. Anyway, we were talking before the commercial break about the fear of things, and my comment, and I wanted to get your take on it. I think that a lot of times with the unknown, people do get a little bit afraid, and there is a little bit of confusion. Again, I threw in there that I think a lot of it is, I don't want to blame it on Hollywood, but it's the movies, it's the scary movies and the stuff that we see. It seems like all these movie makers are trying to outdo each other constantly, and I think that kind of throws a little bit of fear in, and I think a lot of these movie makers do take some of these real things that happen, if we want to call them that, and they throw those into their movies too, and I think that to some degree it can very easily confuse our minds.
Oh, much more than you know. Much more than you know. They are very good at what they do. Movies and modern things in the cultures, these are very carefully scripted to create fear, to take you away from your own experience of nature, to take you away from your own inner experience. I really like watching movies, and I was watching these movies called X-Men.
Yes.
And I thought, you know what? All you got to do is take out the word mutant and put in the word enlightened, and you can see what's going on there.
Right.
They're telling stories about our own spiritual development, but they're making them into something ridiculous. They're making them into something very physical, very matter-of-fact, very entertaining, so that when you're thinking about these things that are about spiritual development, you're thinking about that movie. You're not thinking about the real stuff.
Do you think, now I'm going out on a limb with this one, but I'll throw it out
Limbs
there.
are good.
If we can, while we were talking a little bit about Lost in Space, Star Trek, of course, has been something that the Star Trek universe, Gene Roddenberry started out in the 60s, and we had the humming planets and the humming rocks and again, the cardboard props and that, and now what it's become is just unbelievable. I actually wanted to get down to Las Vegas to the Star Trek convention. Never had a chance to get there and see it. I wanted to go down, and I saw some pictures of it. Just unbelievable. It's a 4-day event that you could go from morning till midnight, and the Star Trek universe has gotten so huge.
Yeah.
People have talked. I've heard this comment made a couple of times, and I don't know if this ties all into it, but I guess could in some way. Gene Roddenberry was a visionary, but then there are some people that feel, and it's been commented before, and I believe he even said it in somewhat of in not necessarily these exact words, but do you feel that some of these visionaries possibly got a look at something that really existed somewhere else?
Without question, Pat. Without question. These were people that were very, very schooled in occult matters and very schooled in inner vision, inner awareness. There are very systematic ways that these things are brought out, and there are people that can see them, and there's people that rise to the top because they see them. And you have to remember, too, is that because you're enlightened, it doesn't mean you're a nice person. There's some very, very evil people out there that are very spiritually accomplished.
Right.
And some of these writers, that have made these TV shows or these, there's a great deal of truth to what goes on. I can name you, 10 or 15 movies or TV shows where, that goes on. That is from other dimensions. That's from other planets. These are things that are very real. And what keeps you mesmerized is seeing them on a television and watching the stories that way rather than living them yourself. Because you know what? We're all very capable of sending our consciousness off this planet and traveling and seeing these things. If you understand mystical practices and shamanistic practices, this is what humanity has done since the beginning of time. This is our story. This is what we can do. And there's beings and entities that have basically, out of sheer jealousy and hatred, are trying to stop us from being able to do that. They want to house us. They want us totally in love with the physical. They want us not to know who we are. And, a great many of these movies, too, are very much, like the movie Thor. I'm sorry, but the guy who wrote that must have seen into other dimensions, because he had fifth dimensional warriors in there. Even the stuff with the one eye, because when you have certain levels of breakthrough spiritually, you get real pain in one of your eyes, in the left eye. Mm-hmm. And this is part of a sort of a badge of spiritual honor, in a sense, in the way that when you go through that, there's all sorts of stuff that go on in that movie are just, the frost giants, the way dimensions are traveled through, the place you go to and that changes so that you can go to other places out in the universe. These are all very real things, and they show them to us in movies. Why? Why can't we learn about them really and actually do them ourselves? Well, the answer is we can, if we break out of their hold, out of their wanting us to be in fear. Does this make sense to you?
It does. What gives a person? Maybe that's, again, I'm using the wrong term, but what gives a spirit when we pass on, when this body here is gone and we move to the next realm, does that give us the ability to experience these other dimensions?
Much depends on how aware you are at the time of death and what state you were in of awareness. How much you can see depends on how aware you are. Yes, you see a great deal more when you've died. There's also a bardo that you go into that you spend time in between lifetimes where you're resting. And, ironically, it's, there's just so many things I can tell you about. There's so much. The bardo is a big circular area that's really lit from inside. That's what you experience it like. And oddly enough, that's what a lot of people experience when they say they've been taken in spaceships. They're really between life and death. It's really a bardo experience that's going on. It's a spiritual thing. So yes, when you die, you do know a lot more. You also just carry on with who you are. You don't magically become all that there is, and then that's it. If you're stupid in this lifetime, you'll be stupid after you're dead. I don't mean to sound rude, but it's a process. It carries through. But yes, you are much, much more aware of lots of different things once you've dropped the body.
I would assume, though, when you've dropped the body, though, there is so much out there for you. I would assume that hanging around haunted locations is not something that you want to do. I mean, I would assume that that energy is somewhat, limitless, maybe.
A lot of what is hanging around haunted locations are kind of entities from other realms trying to trick you into thinking that they're ghosts from other dimensions. Some of it's just repeated energy over, maybe traumatic events that happened, and it's been collected in the earth. Anytime that you're around where there's a lot of water and rocks going past, you're going to find more events of that happening. You're going to find more ghost activity. You're right. People, unless that they've gone through some very terrible tragedy and are so stuck between lifetimes, they don't hang around graveyards. Do you know what I mean? It's
right.
People don't die and just sort of wander around. I mean, you do for a couple of days at times, but you go into the bardo, you go into your next rebirth, or you go off to another area where you're going to be reborn. There's other dimensions you can go into. There's other timelines to go into. So there's a great deal going on. But a lot of the times when people say they see ghosts, there's a lot of tricksters out there in other dimensions that are really trying to bring fear out, because you know what, they feed on fear. It's almost like an energetic thing. They feed on it like almost like the secretions that your hormones have when you're afraid. These beings feed off of that. They gain energy from it. A lot of this kind of stuff goes on in other dimensions. So that's what you're dealing with. A lot of the times when people see this shadow guy with the hat,
right?
The hat man, what's really going on there is when the Kundalini energy, this takes a little bit of explaining, but when the Kundalini energy moves up the Sushumna, up the body, and it goes from the brow, it's inside the body, but when it goes from the brow to the crown of the head, it does so outside the body. And it can look very much like the brim of a hat. So that's how our consciousness sees it. So what you're seeing when you see the man with the hat is someone that has got some skill spiritually in another dimension trying to mess with you.
For what purpose, you think?
Well, the same kind of purpose it would be if you were in a physical body, just looking for power, looking to feel energized. Sometimes they will pull energy from you, and it'll help them gain control of their own spiritual awareness. Quite often, they're also looking for, this is going to sound very frightening, but they're looking for people to take and bond with them, around them, and take them to other dimensions with them. Now, I know that sounds very frightening. I don't want to scare anybody, but that's a lot of what goes on. If they can bond with you and infiltrate into you what's known as kind of like a mind parasite, you will be linked with them karmically, and you will become subservient to them. I don't want to speak about things that would frighten people, but there's a lot of this kind of stuff that does go on.
No, I think people need to be aware, because I sometimes think that people, from time to time, we've got a matter of fact. I'm going to stop just for a little bit because we've got an NBC news break coming up, and then we'll talk about. We got a lot more to cover. We'll talk. We've got Lasha for another hour. And we'll talk about a whole bunch of other stuff, including a little more on this. You can find our website at www.mysticstars.net. Go check it out. There's a lot of fun things there. And we're talking about dimensions and beings and a lot of other stuff and being afraid and when you should be afraid, not be afraid.